Hey friend, Graham here from recordingrevolution.com. Today, let's talk about how to mix guitars in 10 minutes. I want to show you some of my favorite quick mix moves for guitar to make them cut through in your mix, sit beautifully in your mix, and get a quick 10-minute guitar mix. A song I'm breaking down today is called Thief. It's a fun one I did with my buddy Ill Factor. And I'm going to show you a couple of different plugins, one stock, a couple non-stock, but the concepts are the same, and you can do them with a variety of plugins. And what I'm going to show you is how really guitars, even though I know guitars can sound like a million different things, so we could go really deep on different styles of guitar. One way to think about guitar as an instrument in your mix and how to get it to do what it needs to do quickly in your mix. So here's a little bit of a song where we're coming out of a bridge where it's kind of a down break, and then we're about to pick back up with the big overdriven guitars, and the song kind of goes wild. And they'll break down the guitar tones and show you some of these simple and subtle moves that we're doing to get the guitar sounding the way they do. Those are the guitars that we're focusing on today. So there's two overdriven guitars, one on the left and the right. Very simple. They're just doing that chord progression over and over again. And then there's one sort of rhythmic octave guitar here at the end. All right, so if we take off the plugins real quick on these guitars and just listen to them together, this is what you got. And that's the starting point. So what I want to do is point out sort of what I'm listening for with guitars, especially overdriven rock guitars that are supposed to just fill the song, give you the chordal structure, and play nice with the bass, with the synths, with the drums, with the vocals, right? This is not a lead guitar sound. This is just a rhythm guitar sound. By default, just these two guitars on the left and the right, which were played through, I think, IK Multimedia's Amplitude. So these are virtual amps played direct. Right, they're fine, they're fuzzy, they're overdriven. Two main thoughts come to mind, and one has to do with the fact that it's a virtual amp. Anytime I'm doing virtual amps, and if this is you, when I'm going to mix them, I like to grab some kind of saturation plugin. So in this case, I grabbed Stephen Slate's Virtual Tube Collection specifically for the London Tube. Now, you don't have to have this plugin, but this plugin, it adds harmonics, it adds a little bit of distortion, which is kind of what harmonics are, but it adds an analogy dark sound, the London Tube, which it takes away some of the brightness and it kind of adds some thickness to things. So I have found that I like this type of dark saturation plugin on a virtual amp. I think it sounds really cool. So let's listen to one of the guitars by themselves. If you're listening on good headphones or speakers, you're going to notice a little bit of change. You're going to notice the guitar coming forward. This is kind of getting trippy. It's really subtle. It sounds like the guitar comes forward and it has a little more grit to it. It has a little more substance to it before. I just like the little subtle magic that a dark saturation plugin does on virtual amps. So that's your bonus tip is if you have virtual amps that you've plugged in direct, whether it's a amp box like an 11 rack or it is an amp plugin like Amplitube or the like, go for something like the London Tube from Stephen Slate or something equivalent where it's a dark saturation plugin. So I think the PSP Warmer is another good one that can add some of this sort of dark saturation harmonics to it, which is really, really nice. I think it gives your guitars a little more 3D feel. So I added those. And then on the EQ side, this is the main thing that I'm doing with guitars. And this is where I want you to pay attention. So in this case, I'm using the SSL channel strip from Waves. But on the left side is the EQ. So you can ignore the stuff on the right. On the left, there's a few key things happening. The first is at the top, and that's a high pass filter. And you've noticed that I've rolled off all the way up to 158. And so with guitars, especially overdriven guitars, one of the biggest mistakes I see with mixers is they don't use a high pass filter on the guitar. The guitar sounds really full and fat and sweet to them when they're playing it, recording it, which sounds great. But in the mix, you don't need the low end, that ultra low end on a guitar. Why? Because you have a bass or a bass synth. And so the guitar's role is not to fill the sonic spectrum and shine like a diamond. The guitar's role is to occupy the mid-range. Okay, and it's a wide mid-range, not like just a narrow band, but it's a mid-range. So I'm rolling off a lot of the low end here, and that's making a big, big difference because it's going to take off some of the rumble and the woofiness down below. I'm also, and I'll let you hear it in a minute, I'm also rolling off some top end with a low pass filter or a high cut. Why in the world would I do that? Because again, the guitar is not supposed to be the beautiful highs of your mix. I've got synths and I've got keyboards and I've got vocals with a lot of air on them, cymbals. This guitar is supposed to be a mid-range instrument. So I'm rolling off some of the ultra highs, still plenty of high end, but everything I'm rolling off like above 12K or 11.5K. Why? To free up some of that sonic space for those ultra high instruments and focus the guitar on the mid-range. Again, this is a very generous statement when I say mid-range because it's a lot of low mids, upper mids, and even highs. But I'm just rolling off ultra lows and ultra highs to kind of contain the guitar a little bit more. And then on top of that, I'm doing a boost and a cut. And what I want you to see is, well, first I'll just press play and bypass and turn this on, I should say, so you can hear what the difference this EQ is making. But then I want you to notice how this EQ, the blue and the green, are relative to the other guitar part. Hear how the low end went away? It got more pronounced and more focused. It might sound a little thinner to you, but it's not too thin. In the mix, it's perfect. It's not too thin, even if you feel like it is by itself. Let's take a look, though. I'm going to go ahead and put this panning back to where it was because this is a hard left guitar. There's a hard right guitar playing the same part. It has the exact same London Tube because that's just sort of like a sonic thing I wanted to add. But I have some complementary EQ carving happening. This is the big takeaway for today's video. So let me pull up. This is the EQ on the left. And then this is the EQ on the right guitar. If you look, you're going to see the exact same high pass virtually and the exact same low pass. But on the green and the blue section, my sort of high mid frequency and low mid frequency, you're going to see something very interesting. You're going to see that they are complete opposites. So if the guitar on the left, I've done a 6 dB boost at 1K. That's where I wanted to pronounce it more. The guitar on the right, I've done a 6 dB cut at 1K. Okay. So where I thought the guitar on the left had a cool mid-range bite at 1K, where it really kind of stuck out in the mix, I'm doing this while I'm listening to the mix in mono. I'm listening to all the tracks in the mix together. I'm trying to hear the guitar in context with everything else. I'm sweeping the EQ around till I find at 1K. I hear that guitar a little bit better. I leave it at 1K, gave it a 6 dB boost, and I immediately pulled out 6 dB on the guitar to the right and the exact same frequency, which gives me a 12 dB spread, meaning there's a 12 dB difference around that frequency, which is going to make them stand out from each other a little bit more. But then we take it a step further. On the guitar on the right, I found a spot to boost that sounded cool at 2K. And so then on the guitar on the left, I cut 6 dB of 2K. So I'm doing the opposite. They're complementary. We now have a 12 dB spread at 1K and a 12 dB spread at 2K between these two guitars, hard panned left and right. What that does is not only does it gives them each a little bit of its own sonic character, one's got more of a 1K boost, one's got more of a 2K boost, but I'm cutting out the 1 and the 2K from the opposite guitar so that they create more stereo spread. When you've got like-minded doubled guitars on the hard left and the right, if they aren't dramatically different guitar tones or amp tones, this type of complementary EQ move goes a long way to making the guitars stand out from each other in the mix. But not only that, give you more wideness, more width. It's just an optical illusion, or it's an auditory illusion, I should say. It gives you more perceived width without having to do a lot of stereo widening. It's really, really cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press play on just these two guitars, and I want you to hear them without the EQs and then with the EQs. And you're going to hear them clean up from the low end, of course, with those high-pass filters, and the top end with the low-pass filters. But you're going to hear them start to spread left and right a little bit more. They thin out and they seem to separate a little bit more, which gives you more apparent width in your mix, which is huge. So the big takeaway I want you to see on main guitars is saturate them if you can, and then high pass, low pass for the ultra lows, ultra highs, and then find some mid-range complementary EQ curves that you can play if you have hard left and hard right doubled guitars, which is very common. Final thing I want to show you is if you have any kind of lead guitar or riffing guitar. In this case, I've got this sort of octave guitar here. This was getting lost in the mix. And so you can either EQ the mid-range out of this like crazy, or if you have a cool, I love this plugin that comes with Pro Tools. It's stock. It's called Fuzz Wah. It's one of the most underrated plugins, but it's a wah pedal and an overdrive in one. And so a lot of times I'll use it just for the wah pedal, which in essence is like extreme EQ boosts and filtering. So you can do this with filters, you can do this with EQ, but I'm trying to find an extreme mid-range frequency that just sounds super, super cool. So let's take a listen to what this is doing by itself. It's just a wah pedal. So if you have a wah pedal or a wah pedal plugin, this is a great tool to kind of create some weird mid-range bite on a lead part that just needs to cut through. You'll notice I'm using a mix knob, so you could do this manually by duplicating the guitar part, having an extreme EQ filter on one version, keep the other one natural, and blend the two evenly. I've got it almost 60%, so it's almost a little bit more of the filtered guitar than the natural guitar, but it's a blend. It's not just the complete filtered guitar. And that will allow it to cut through the mix a little bit better, because if I take it off, it's kind of getting lost in the guitars. See how you notice it so much more? Not because it's louder, but because it has its own sonic frequency, its own imprint. It's got its own little space to play in, especially with the rest of the mix. Like I'll turn it off in the mix. Even in a dense mix, you notice it better when it has its own little sonic character space to play. Final thing I did with this guitar was I put it through a slap delay, and that delay, I'm using a send here. That delay is just the stock mod delay that comes with Pro Tools, and I'm using the slap spread preset to just give it a little bit of back and forth. So it's a very short delay, 55 milliseconds on one side, 110 on the other side, so it's double on the other side. And I'm rolling off top end, so it's a low pass frequency. Everything above 4K I've rolled off, so it's more of like a mellow, sort of low frequency delay. Take it off. It's pretty cool, right? And I'm using a little bit of a send and just kind of panning the slap where I want it to be. And that just gives it just a cool character piece. So these guitars, they really have come a long way. I'll take everything off after we press play. And there you go. That's how I think about mixing guitars in 10 minutes. Filtering, mid-frequency focus, complementary EQ carving. Give every guitar its own little sonic piece of real estate. It goes a long, long way. Now, before you go, I want to give you something. I want to give you my 8-step mixing checklist. This is something that a lot of my students have found super, super helpful. As you're approaching mixing, it's very easy to get lost in the weeds with just one instrument or one plugin or one technique. What you need is a process to go from beginning to end to make sure you get the whole mix coming together beautifully. I'm such a linear person, and I literally follow an 8-step workflow when I mix a song. And I documented that workflow in a simple PDF that you can walk through just to give you step 1, step 2, step 3. So you can just check your way through and make sure you're not skipping a single step in the mixing process. I want to give you that checklist. I also want to give you a few multi-track stems you can download if you haven't already to practice your mixing on, and a couple other video goodies as well. It's all for free. Just go to mixingchecklist.com. I'll link below here in the description as well. Mixingchecklist.com. Grab your PDF checklist and the multi-track stems. And then I'm curious about you. When you mix guitars, do you have a go-to mix move or a go-to plugin that has really become helpful for you to get the guitar tone that you want or need in your mix? If so, leave me a comment below and let me know, and let everyone else know what that is. There's a lot of ways to approach guitars. I just gave you some of my quickest, most helpful ways to think about it in this video, but I'd love to hear from you in a comment below. Thanks, as always, for liking this video and subscribing to this channel. It means a ton. Hope you're staying healthy and safe, and I'll see you in another video real soon.